Many years ago when I lived out on the West Coast, I did what was known as a high ropes course, and I did that a number of times. And I found them great fun, but they also taught a lot of really good life lessons. And one of the elements that I did is I was standing 50 feet above the ground on a half-inch steel cable, and I was harnessed in and roped in with somebody belaying me down below. And I was holding on to this massive Douglas fir tree, and the next thing that I had to grab onto was this rope that was dangling down in front of me, but that I couldn't reach unless I let go of the tree. And so it took a step of faith, actually it took a leap of faith, of letting go of this tree that was so comforting and so stable, and now I had to grab onto this rope in order to keep moving forward. And those few terrifying seconds were also exhilarating, but they taught me an important lesson in life that I've come to realize has many applications. And I think it's a lesson that has something for each one of us at different stages in our lives. I've now come to know this as the neutral zone. So the neutral zone can be really important in our discipleship. Many years ago, an author by the name of William Bridges wrote a book called Transitions, and it's been helpful for me to think more deeply about some of these things, including the three phases that he talks about in that book about what every transition seems to have. The first phase is the ending, and that is when we let go of that which is familiar to us. The second phase is the neutral zone. It's that nowhere place of in-betweenness where we get confused and disoriented. And then there's the final phase, which is the new beginnings. And that's when we finally get to see and grab onto something that is new, that is part of the next phase of our lives. So transitions are this natural process of disorientation and reorientation. And it's these phases that we go through that are a really important part of our growth. And so neutral zones are this time when we've let go of that which is familiar, that which is comfortable and safe, and we haven't yet grabbed on to that which is the new beginning. In the first segment of this video series, I talked about leaving home. And in many ways, leaving home is that phase of endings. And then you enter this neutral zone phase where you're not exactly sure what's next. And now you've let go of that thing that was stable and secure and familiar to you, like that big Douglas fir tree that you're holding on to, but you haven't yet been able to grab hold of what is next. You can't even necessarily see what's next, let alone grab hold of it. And so neutral zones are a time that can be intimidating and frustrating. Neutral zones are a time where God can seem really silent and distant. But neutral zones are also a time of incredible possibility and creativity if we allow them to be so. Neutral zones in our lives can be really short or they can be really long. When I think of biblical characters, I think of Moses, who had 40 years in the wilderness. That was a long neutral zone. I think of the Apostle Paul, who started out as Saul, and as you read about his transformation story in Acts chapter 9, you see that he had 3 days of blindness, 3 days of God doing a hard ending to what he previously was doing in his life and was calling him to something completely new. But he had these 3 days of in-betweenness that I'm sure God spoke to him in all kinds of different ways and started to change his heart and change his focus in life. When I think of my own life, I think of many neutral zones in my life. One of them was 2 years in Calgary, where I had let go of a previous identity and a previous role in life, and now I didn't know what was ahead, but I knew that it was just this neutral zone, and it was hard and difficult, and God seemed silent, but God was also doing some really important work during that phase of my life. One of the quotes that I like, that I'm not sure where it came from, but it's really encouraged me in this area, is a quote that says this: "You'll never be able to discover new lands unless you're willing to lose sight of shore for a long time." You know, for us as a church, we're going through, in many ways, a neutral zone. The church as a whole is going through a neutral zone. The season of COVID has changed all of our usual patterns of discipleship. All of our in-person gatherings, whether it's corporate worship gatherings, whether it's small group gatherings, youth gatherings, seniors gatherings, any kinds of gatherings, even gatherings with your family in your homes, they've all changed, and they all have restrictions and limitations, and they just feel really different. And so for us as a church as a whole, we're in this season of, we've had to let go of what was familiar and safe, and now we aren't exactly sure what lies ahead of us. And yet I would say that it is a really unique opportunity where God is doing something new. If we just pay attention and seek God's face and ask God, okay, what is it that you have for us during this time? I really believe it's a time of new possibility and a time for creativity, if we allow it to be that. This is also true in our personal lives as well. I would venture to guess that many of you, maybe most of you, are going through some kind of neutral zone in your life right now as well. And it could be for the reasons that I mentioned. It could be for all kinds of other reasons. I don't know what it is for you. But if we allow this time to actually be a time where God can speak to us, it can be a time of really significant transition and change and transformation in our lives. And I would just say to you, be encouraged. God is at work. He is more at work than you realize. Keep seeking God even in the silence. Keep moving forward even when you want to go back. You know, the people of Israel, they wanted to go back to Egypt even though it was slavery, but at least it was familiar to them. But God is a God who keeps calling us forward all the time. You know, the Apostle Paul, he wrote about this as part of our discipleship in Philippians 3 as well. And he talked about this one thing that I do, and then he said two things. He says, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead. I press on to Christ Jesus. And that's what we're called to do in the neutral zone, is forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, even if we can't see it, even if we can't yet grab hold of it. That's actually called faith, being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. I pray that in this season, in whatever neutral zone that you're experiencing, that you will allow God to speak to you and that you will allow God to shape and transform you in this season of discipleship for you, that it could be significant and life-changing, even though at times it can be hard. May God give us faith to keep moving forward into the unknown, because He is a God who's always faithful.